right, well, we're here with Laura Morton. Thank you for coming. And we're going to hit the ground running. I have some rapid fire questions for you, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. It is great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks. We'll get into all that.
No, it's good.
All right, so here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
Rapid fire. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Dogs, good. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Ooh, I have to go Star Wars.
Rolling Stones or the Beatles?
That's a tough one. Ooh, I got to go with my gut, Rolling Stones. Even though, I don't know, that's a tough one. I have to have a draw on that one.
Should I force you to pick?
Say it again?
Should I force you to pick one?
Okay, if you have to force me to pick one, I don't know, I'm very torn. I'll go Rolling Stones.
Coke or Pepsi?
Neither.
I don't drink either. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
PC or Mac?
I'm PC.
Really?
I am.
In your line of work, PC?
I am, and we can talk about this later. I just got rid of my BlackBerry for Pete's sake.
What?
No, I'm kidding.
Okay. East Coast or West Coast? You've been in both.
Can I say I'm bi-coastal?
You can.
Okay.
I'll let you go with that.
Okay, but okay. I mean, I'm genuinely bi-coastal. Like, I love both.
Okay. Kramer or Costanza?
Great question. Kramer.
Superman or Batman?
Superman.
All right, this is the last one, and I think it's the best one. Kardashians or Osbournes? Both crazy families.
Yeah, I like the Kardashians, so I'm going to go Kardashians.
What do you like about them?
Okay, I'll tell you what I like about the Kardashians. I think that there is a sense of family togetherness.
Yeah.
As crazy as their circumstances might be, there is a notion that they spend time together. They're always at each other's houses, and I know that this is true even when the cameras are not rolling.
Yeah.
I like that they work with their mom, and I like that they've entrusted their mom. That's not an easy thing to do in the business.
No, because she's the manager for everybody, right?
Exactly. I think they've been challenged and through quite a bit, and I think they've stayed together as a family. I like the way that they've rallied around other members of their family when they've needed love and support.
They do. They're like a pack.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're changing me.
Right. I mean, you can take all the other stuff, and I call that white noise, but at the end of the day, I think you could pick up the phone and call Kim, and she would be there.
What do you think drives people crazy about those guys?
I think there is a sense of entitlement. And I think that because they are this family that shows their wealth in such, I think, extreme ways.
Do you think it's unearned talent, the perception of?
Listen, and I it's not easy to do what they do, right. And it's a commitment to do what they do. And so why do I think people are so hard on them? I think they're hard on them because everybody needs a target. And if they're having failure in their own family, then they certainly don't want to see a family like the Kardashians succeeding as a family. I don't mean succeeding financially. I'm talking about succeeding as a family unit.
Right.
You're talking about the three older girls who lost their father at a very early age, who was in a very high-profile, lawsuit defending O.J. Simpson, whose their mother absolutely 100% believes that her husband was defending a killer. And so you have these little girls trying to figure out, what's going on there. They grow up, and now you've got a blended family with another superstar, with Caitlyn, but when Caitlyn was Bruce. And I don't think that's easy by any stretch of the imagination, because I don't think Bruce came into that situation without everybody really knowing what was going on. I think they've all written about it now, yeah. And I think that's traumatic. I think that's hard, but they still stayed together as a family. And at the end of the day, that's where my core beliefs are family first. And so and by the way, that is not in any way a knock against Sharon and Ozzy. I think they've been through a lot. And I really respect and admire what a lot
of that was self-inflicted.
A lot, but isn't it all?
Yeah.
But Sharon stood by his side, and they have pretty good kids. I mean, their kids have gone on to do, their kids have gone on to do really well, and they've gotten themselves out of the limelight, a little more than the Kardashians, who really seek the limelight, and I don't blame them. That is what they've chosen to do. If they use their platform to do some good along the way, then who am I to judge?
I think people that aren't in the business don't realize how much work goes into being famous or getting the promotion that you need or getting the 1 million followers on Instagram. I don't think people realize how much work that is. It is earned talent.
It is earned talent, and I will tell you that if they weren't doing something right, your fan base is fickle. Your fan base doesn't stick with you. They don't stick with people they don't like.
It's been a nice run.
And their fan base is growing. I mean, look at, I think it's Kylie right now who's outperforming all of her siblings in her makeup line, I think.
Sure.
And so, no, I don't, listen, I'm not, I don't sit home and watch the Kardashians, but if I happen to catch it, I find the show very endearing in many ways. I really, as a mom, I could only hope that my daughter at some point would want to be home and around her mom and bring her friends around and bring her boyfriend around, or and that I could have that kind of ongoing rapport when she's the age that these girls are. Because normally you go off, you get married, you see mom, maybe bring the grandchildren over every now and then. They all have very independent lives. I would wish that for my own child. I wish, for my daughter to have independent success. And, you've got to do the work. My daughter wants to be an actress. And I tell her all the time, it's a tough profession. It's full of a lot of rejection. And, and I think that teaches a lot in terms of being able to handle what real life situations are all about. Because life is about rejection. It's not really all adulation.
Well, I think this moment speaks to their success as well, because out of all those rapid fire questions, that was the question that sprung this conversation.
Right.
The Kardashians.
Yeah, well, listen, if you can watch it, you're talking to somebody who worked with Jerry Springer.
Yeah.
So, and again, Jerry was just the voice of reason. He certainly wasn't the guest on his show. And at the end of every show, he would wrap up the show with his final thoughts. And his final thoughts were always what you were thinking at home.
Right.
And thinking, why would anybody on this show? Why would anybody tell that story? Why would anybody expose their dirty laundry this way? And in a way, it was the advent of Ricki Lake and Jerry Springer that created what became the Kardashians. Because not only did we want to look into those lives, the guests on Ricki and Jerry and all the other shows that were around at that time, but we wanted to get to know them. We didn't want, 1 hour. We really wanted to get to know them. So reality television was born out of our voyeuristic desire to either feel better or worse about our own lives. And that's why people read the tabloids.
So I grew up reading the tabloids. We lived about a mile away from my mom's parents. And my grandfather had an electrical business. My mom was his bookkeeper. So first 5 years of life, I grew up there. And my grandmother would get the Star and the Inquirer and whatever else is out there. And I would just sit there with her hand-me-downs. I would just look at them, and I grew up reading that stuff. And it's still now, it's fascinating. And I don't want it to be, but it's part of who we are as a society, I guess.
Listen, people love to live in drama.
Yeah.
And, and part of living in drama is absorbing other people's drama, because it taps something within us that it's a bar, right? Yeah. It's a bar that we say, oh, my life's not that bad, or gee, I wish my life was that good, because we can't help but compare ourselves to other people. I have a client who taught me the value of the 4 addictions that hold us all back in life. And you want to take a guess on what those are? Do you know?
I don't know why greed came to mind. Is greed one of them?
No.
Love?
No.
I'm striking out.
Yeah,
What are they?
You're 0 for 2. So the addiction to worry.
Okay.
The addiction to the past. The addiction to the opinions of others, and the addiction to the past. Oh, wait, did I say past?
Yeah.
Worry, drama.
Okay.
Yeah, which we had just talked about. Worry, drama, the addiction to the past, and the addiction to the opinions of others. If you can look at that as a core, okay, every other addiction is a byproduct of that.
I can see that.
Okay, every other addiction is a byproduct of that. And learning to let go of those addictions is really freeing. Now, some people might have one, they might have all four. Mine, for sure, was the addiction to worry. I still worry, but not as much as I used to. I worried about everything, even things that were just not in my control. And learning to give up that addiction was really freeing for me because it allowed me to understand what true acceptance is and, really having a sense of the fact that we can't control the uncontrollable. There are things that we can do that will change our trajectory, choices that we make.
Which are those four things?
Well, yeah, so we can absolutely, but we also have the ability to not let those four things rule our lives. You know somebody for sure that talks about when they were the high school football star,
oh, yeah.
Okay, or the cheerleader, or the homecoming queen, or the girl or the guy that got away and I should have married that person. How is it possible to live in the moment, in the here and now, when you're living in the past? I mean, we live in such a disconnected world anyway, even though we feel like we're connected because we're on our devices 24/7. I mean, we can communicate across the room or across the board or across the globe, right? And all through a text message. Like I could be texting you right now going, this show's going really great. Or I could send that same message to Shanghai. So we live in a really connected world, but what we've done in the process is we've disconnected. And communication has broken down. And I think that for understanding those four addictions, right? You can't, if you're worried about what's coming next, okay, what's happening down the road, then you can't be in the here and now. You can't be in the moment. And living in the moment is really where you need to be.
It's all missing the now. Because, I'm reading this book now that's the first couple chapters is focusing on you have to burn your past. You just set it on fire and walk away from it. Because you can't be in two places at the same time.
Exactly what I'm saying. If you just live for what was or for what you might be, you can't live now.
Yeah.
And so, which means you're not present for your family, you're not present at work, you're not present for friends, you're not present for yourself.
Most importantly, opportunities.
Oh, good Lord. We would never think of going to bed at night without what? Plugging in our cell phones,
right.
Recharging the battery, making sure you're
checking one last time.
Check, right? Right? And yet, when do we give ourselves that moment to recharge? We treat our phones and our devices better than we do ourselves.
I heard a stat the other day that we check our phones 85 times a day. That's alarming.
It's got to be low for me because I check my phone all the time, but it is like, so many people. It's my office. It's my lifeline. And there are. I'll tell you what happened. I would really like to break is going on Facebook as much as I do. You said you broke your Facebook habit.
I can't get on Facebook anymore, and it's mostly about politics because it's I don't even know how to get into it. It's so frustrating that we all want inclusion and we all want respect, but you go there and the very people that are asking for it and demanding it are the very people that are intolerant and the very people that, if you don't like what I like, befriend me. And I might even agree with them, but I'm like, okay, I don't need you to ask me to defriend you anymore because I just did, because I can't live this way.
No, the noise is just getting louder. Yeah, there is no conversation. It's an awful lot of declaration. Yeah. And it's coming from so many different directions. And I know we don't want to get into a political conversation, so we should divert off of this. But it's depressing from the standpoint of, Facebook used to be the light place to go to, look at your
Laura
kid, right?
Look what Laura ate last night,
right? Look at Laura, or I'm at this great restaurant, or my daughter's dance recital, and nobody cares about that kind of stuff anymore. And I don't even know how half the issues that are out on Facebook right now have even become partisan. I just don't understand how how a lot of the hot topics right now are partisan issues. Yeah. And I just can't. And I had dinner with somebody the other night who said to me, I'm angry because I live in a country where I can't tell people who I voted for. And I said, oh, you see, but you do live in a country where you can tell people who you voted for. And isn't that a beautiful thing? You're choosing not to share that information. And, we still have that ability, thank goodness, that we have that freedom. You can, you can say anything. And, but
there's a reaction to that.
Right. So, but it's the reaction. So if you don't want to live with the reaction, but this is a truism for life, right? And this isn't just about politics. It's a truism for life. If you're going to make any kind of declaration, then be prepared for somebody else to have an opinion of their own. Here's where I circle back to the 4 addictions. Don't be tied to that opinion. Don't let that opinion dictate.
Right. It shouldn't matter what anyone else thinks.
If you are strong in your conviction and you're strong in your beliefs, it doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks. It's not going to deter you from doing what you firmly believe in.
All right. So I have a question about that. You're a writer, and you depend on people liking what you do. I'm in television. My job is to make sure, my client, and that client could be a physical client, a company, or it could be the audience is my client. I find that as I get more and more into the business, 22 years now, that I'm becoming more and more insecure about the creative aspect of it because of my life depends on asking people if they like it or not. Do you find that to be the case at all when you write a book, and do you cringe to see if it comes back what the numbers are and
not really, because you don't have so this great life lesson, this great epiphany that I had in the last couple of years, again, I'll repeat it, you can't control the uncontrollable. So especially in the fields that we work in, if you create something, and I worked in television before I was writing books, if you create something that not think, but know is good, you have to stand strong in that conviction. So to your point and to your question, I can't control, here's what I can't control. I can't control how a publisher markets that book. Okay? I can't control how they advertise it.
Yeah.
I can't control how people, receive that book. What I can control is the quality of the content that I create. And I know when I've written a really good book, I know when I've written a pretty good book, and I've never written anything less than that. So.
All right, well, let's get into that.
Yeah. Does that make sense, though?
It does.
Yeah, so I it's like an actor, who doesn't read the reviews. Why? I mean, why bother?
Yeah.
If I go on Amazon and I read, here's the thing. Before we move on if I go on Amazon and I read what people say about my books, for the most part, it is positive and thank you for writing this. But every now and then you'll get some Weisenheimer who will be like, I would have read this book, but there were just too many swear words in it. But it was part of the story.
Sure.
Or something like, I'm a part-time editor and I found 2 typos in this book. Therefore, I'm giving it 1 star.
Oh my gosh.
You're like, are you kidding me? It has nothing to do with the content. And, it just, what people respond to, and this is such a great way to look at it, is those are their triggers. It's not really about what you've provided them. It's what triggers inside for them.
How do you react when the publisher comes back and gives you notes and those notes are wrong?
Sometimes I will push back. Well, first of all, we have editorial control. Okay. So a publisher can come back and give me notes and we have the right to say yes or no. So it is, but sometimes, and I'll give you a great example. I wrote a book a couple of years ago with Brad Davidson, who is an extraordinary health and wellness expert out of Southern California, and he works with special ops, the Navy SEALs, pro athletes. He works with a lot of people. The book was called The Stark Naked 21-Day Metabolic Reset. On the cover of the book, we wanted the words "for high achievers," and the publisher fought us on having high achievers on the cover of the book, and they wanted to put the word diet on the cover of the book.
Did they not want to alienate people?
They didn't want to alienate people. What we said to them...
What people would that be?
Right. They said, well, what if you don't see yourself as a high achiever? And we're well, then, frankly, the book's not for you. And we're willing to stand in that, and we're willing to say, don't buy the book. Because if you can't see yourself as a high achiever, this program isn't going to work for you. It's not the program for you. Go and eat your, Fruit Loops and Pop-Tarts and whatever, because this is not the program for you. It's not that it was a challenging program, but it was a program that was a lifestyle change. And therefore, we also fought that notion of putting the word diet on the cover. Now, diet books
is temporary.
Well, diet is temporary, but diet books from an old school marketing point of view, if it's a diet, then we should call it a diet. And we're like, but it's not a diet. It's a metabolic reset. It has nothing to do with losing weight. Losing weight is a byproduct. Mm-hmm. So we really fought the fight, and we won. But we all the time, we'll get those kinds of notes, those kinds of arguments, and marketing and sales. I think it was the movie Sideways, where he was writing the book, and it got killed in marketing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is so true in publishing. Your marketing and sales team can just say, I don't get it. I don't like the cover. I showed it to Barnes & Noble. They want a different cover. That's when, you really have some deep soul searching to do. But if you really believe what you're doing is right, then don't be beholden to a publisher. Now, I'm making a statement that is not true and fair for everyone. But we live in a world now where you can self-publish. We live in a world where nobody cares whose name is on the binding of that book. So if you believe wholeheartedly in your product, just like we were talking about earlier, don't let it die on the kitchen table. Don't let it die because some publisher says there's no market for it. Because what they're really saying, and I'll translate it, is we're not going to put the money behind you because it's going to be hard. Not impossible, just hard.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
No one wants difficult.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I've built my career on concentrated hustle. And so somebody tells me no, and that is my starting off point to yes, because I absolutely know that nothing rational ever became great.
Well, some say if you are rational, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
If you're not affecting anyone, if someone doesn't have an opinion or a reaction to you, then you're not,
Yeah, I mean, in publishing, you've got, 26, 27-year-old, men and women telling you what's going to work and what's not going to work. And look, I've been writing books for 30 years. Pretty sure I have a handle on what's going to work. So that's why I don't even, I do still work in traditional publishing, but more often than not, I've actually gotten away from that and have done, distribution deals with all of the big houses, because that's all I really want them for. And I control everything else.
All right, well, let's jump back to the starting point of all this. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I thought that I was going to be a rock star.
Okay.
I did.
Me too.
I wanted to be Pat Benatar.
Are you still trying to?
Yeah. I don't have the voice for it. Every time I do karaoke, they shut down the
What
sound.
is it about Pat Benatar? Because I was literally listening to her on the way here, and I even thought, I took it a step further, her voice reminds me of Pink's voice. And I was looking up, and I shouldn't have done this when I was driving, but like Pink doing covers of Pat Benatar, because I think that would be amazing, and I couldn't find any. But what you wanted to be Pat Benatar?
She was a fierce female.
Yeah.
There really was at that time very few women that, and much like Pink, who were putting a positive message out for young girls, who was standing up and had a voice, and her songs had really strong messages. And it's what I was drawn to. It's why when I worked with Melissa Etheridge, I loved working with her. Same thing. Great storyteller. Her songs were really vivid, but I loved her voice. And she was sexy and is sexy. She's still sexy. I went to go see Stevie Nicks and the Pretenders in LA at the Forum last year in December. I mean, talk about taking me back to my, my fun years of college. But I mean, they're still rocking. Chrissie Hynde, she rocked that stage. I mean, absolutely rocked that stage. And this was the second time that I had seen Stevie Nicks. And she puts on a good show, and she's a good storyteller as well. And I mean, her music is really, I think, poignant. But Chrissy Hine just blew her off the stage. Sure.
Did you make any steps to become a rock star?
In high school, I played around with the band. I would do like talent night and stuff like that. And then when I went to college and I was in a sorority, I was always, the one playing the guitar. And then I ended up like hosting. So what happened in college is I ended up shifting away from singing because really singing is not my thing. And I wish it was. But so I made a little shift, but I liked being on stage. So I started doing stand-up comedy.
Oh my gosh.
I did.
Did you really?
I did. And I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder.
Okay.
And on Monday nights, there was an amateur night at the Comedy Works in Denver. And I performed with Roseanne Barr, Jeff Cesario. There was a whole list of people who've gone on to become hugely successful. But I wasn't doing comedy under my name. I did it under the name of Muffy Epstein. I was the preppy Jew. See, it's just, even the name is funny. Yeah.
So, do you remember like your first set?
I do.
Like, how difficult was it to put your first 5 minutes together?
Not so hard because I'm a master storyteller. I'm a master storyteller, and so I really was just drawing on my own experiences.
So it was like observation comedy?
Observation comedy, and coming out of the Greek system in Boulder, and talking about my whole experience. Like, my greatest accomplishment in graduating from Boulder was never owned not one thing that said Patagonia on it, and this was an accomplishment. Like, this was not an easy thing to do, but my first set wasn't that hard. I went on to like host like Greek Week and all of that stuff. And what I realized, especially in working with some of the people that I worked with on these amateur nights, is that was not the life for me. It is a lonely life. It is, you could play a room of one, you can play an empty room and you still have to do your set. And it just wasn't the life for me. So I never really went very far with it. Although, I grew up with Mike Binder, who, has done extraordinary things in Hollywood, and Sam Raimi. And
so where did you grow up?
In Michigan, okay. Detroit.
Okay. In
the suburbs of Detroit. And which I always tell people is a great place to be from. And Detroit's coming back around. I think certainly in entertainment and filming, there's a lot going on there. But it was a cool place to grow up.
So what did your parents do for a living?
So my dad was in the heating and air conditioning business. He was just a laborman, and my mom passed away when I was 10.
Okay.
So that was it. And my dad, he had his own company, but that was his trade, was heating and air conditioning. So
by no means did that influence you one way or another of what you wanted to?
I'll tell you, it influenced my love of air conditioning. But other than that.
I can turn it down in here.
Yeah, no, it's good. It did not influence me at all. My greatest influence in terms of where I saw myself growing up, I had cousins who were very theatrical and taught me about Broadway, taught me about musicals, taught me about the theater in general. And that was a huge influence on me. Music, for whatever reason, has always been a big part of my life. Yeah. And isn't it really the songbook, right? And one song can just take you right back to a moment, and you can think back to whatever that moment in time is. But music has always been really influential. I played guitar.
Okay.
Growing up.
What was your first guitar?
Oh,
Do you remember?
No, I don't. It was just some probably cheap acoustic guitar. Now I've got some nice ones, and I'm so fortunate that my clients have given me guitars right off of tour. I've had them give me their. Oh yeah.
All right, we have to talk about this because I'm a amateur guitar collector of 30-something years now. What is your most? Give me the top 5 guitars in your collection. So
Fieldy from Korn gave me a Ibanez.
He plays Ibanez 7-string.
No, he gave me it's a 5-string, I think, or a 4-string. I can't.
Really?
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not 7, but it was right off tour.
Okay.
And it was still in the tour case and everything when he gave it to me. Jon Bon Jovi gave me a guitar. Now, I will tell you my favorite one is my Ovation that I got from Melissa.
Okay.
Because it's the 12-string that's custom made for her. And she does not give those away. She gives all the time. She'll give away 6 strings because she does stuff for charity and she's really philanthropic. But when she gave me that 12-string, even her manager was like, I've never in all the years that I've been managing her, which was the beginning of her career, she's never asked for one of these. So it really is special that I have that. And people come over to my house and they can play any guitar on my wall. I want them to play them. And so, they're playing Melissa's 12-string. They're playing Fieldy's bass. They're playing John's 6-string. They're playing, so it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
I'm going to have to come over now.
Absolutely. And then I've got a bunch of, Fender Stratocasters and things like that. And
my new thing now is a 65 Fender Jaguar. I don't know why. It's just I've gravitated towards that. My favorite guitar that I have is it's not even on paper. It's it's a nice guitar. It's a 2005 Gibson Les Paul Standard faded. You can't find them anywhere. So it's right before Gibson started making kind of crappy guitars. But I came up here and got Les Paul to sign it to me
great.
a year before he passed away. And
that just added value.
So I'll tell you the interesting story. I had lost my 93-year-old grandfather months prior to that. And the whole time he used to tell me, keep rocking. That was his thing to me. And we sat at the Iridium, and I don't know, I just felt my grandfather's vibe in that room the whole entire time.
Oh, that's so great.
And we were the last people of about 50 to 60 people waiting in line to get their stuff signed after the concert. And I was literally one of the last people, and we saw all these people walk past us, and me and my buddy were like, hey, what did he do? What did he sign? And he signed everybody, keep picking. Every single person, 2 blank, keep picking Les Paul. And then he got up to me, and he I don't know, there's this weird vibe between he and I. And then I didn't even look at what he wrote. I just, I was just in awe of just being in his presence. And then I picked up my guitar, and it wasn't until I got back to the hotel room where I opened up the case and I looked at it, and the thing said, to Tom, keep rocking Les Paul.
I have chills. That's amazing.
And it was, I'm getting, my hair is raising up on my arms now. And I could not believe, so that is my prized possession. But I have this addiction where I can't stop. And, I was scouting out guitar stores while I was pulling in, going, where am I going today?
Which one of the 4 addictions does that stem from, Tom?
I just sold a bunch of equipment because I realized I've been collecting for 30-something years. And when you first start collecting guitars when you're in your teens, you're not buying quality stuff at all. So I kind of sat back and I thought, well, I need to get rid of some of this stuff because it's making the other stuff look bad. So I got rid of stuff, and I had friends calling me going, are you all right? Is everything okay? You're getting rid of some of the stuff? I'm like, yeah, I need to get rid of it. I need to thin it out, but I'm doing it really so I'm going back to the store tomorrow and getting an amp and this and that and whatever. But
do you play them?
I play every day.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. And at the studio, I have a nice 212 EVH cabinet and a tube amp. And then my new fixation is this Line 6 Helix floorboard guitar processor thing. And it makes any type of, you could do A/B testing to any effect, anything, and it sounds identical. And it's all on this one floorboard. And
that's awesome. First of all, I'd love to come and see your studio.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that would be amazing. I play from time to time. I keep trying to get my daughter into guitar, and she picks up the guitars every now and then, but she hasn't gotten that. She doesn't have that same passion. Yeah. I grew up with that passion, and I grew up playing Bob Dylan and Jim Croce and John Denver and whatever. It was the songs of my era, and that was. I'm so sorry I keep hitting the mic. But it was just amazing. But I will tell you, Bruce Springsteen is probably where I cannot wait for a show to open.
How many times have you seen him?
Oh God, 22, 23 times, and. I'm the idea of seeing him someplace so intimate as Broadway is just.
Oh, is he doing Broadway?
Yes, he's doing a one-man show.
That has completely escaped me.
Yes. So he's going to do a one-man show. It'll be fantastic. It'll be absolutely fantastic. I think when the songwriters have the opportunity to really tell a story through their songbook, I think it's really extraordinary, and I'm hoping that's what he does.
Yeah, music is bumming me out. I have a LP collection that I started a couple years ago, and there's a guy that started a record store in Frederick, Maryland, of all places, and it's like Old Town Frederick, and he started with his personal collection. He had like 2,000 LPs in his collection, and he's like, I got rid of these things. So he set up a store, and I absolutely love going in there. And I know it seems lazy, but I like looking through all the stacks, but I enjoy more just shouting out to him, hey, Ozzy Osbourne. Knowing that he has it or doesn't have it, I don't know, but he's like, yeah, I have Bark at the Moon, and it's got a tear at the right corner. He knows and Led Zeppelin. Well, I got In Through the Outdoor, but it's got, it's a B-side. He knows everything. But music is getting me sad lately because we're losing everybody. Mm-hmm. And what makes me really sad about it is we're gonna live in a world. I'm hoping it's not this soon, but within 5-10 years maybe, where Paul McCartney's not going to be walking around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we just lost Tom Petty last week, and I think about what's going to happen. Not only does that make you feel old, and you think about mortality, but you think what's next?
And who are those iconic?
We don't have any, I don't think.
I don't.
I mean, you could argue like the Beyoncés of the world and all that kind of stuff. I can't.
Yeah.
She's great for what she does.
Yeah, but even some of those Prince and Michael and it's really hard for me to kind of pinpoint and go, look, I'm an Eminem fan. I love Eminem. I think again because he's such a great storyteller, he's so vivid, and which started my you have your odd obsession with guitars, and I have an odd obsession with rap.
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, see? And because as somebody who tells stories, if you really listen to it, there's deep messaging. I'm not saying everybody, but for sure in the early rap. And then when you've got someone like, Eminem, he's very message driven. And I think a lot of the artists are. I think Jay-Z is very message driven. I think Kanye is very message driven. And you don't have to agree with the message, you don't have to agree with the philosophy, but the art is,
Did you watch that Jimmy Iovine?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
It was fascinating.
I thought it was awesome. I thought it was absolutely awesome. I thought they did a great job with it. I did. In fact, I knew bits and pieces of the Beats story. I didn't understand how well thought out it was with him and getting the artists and and really teeing them. Listen, when you're an innovator, you see things nobody else in the room can.
Right.
And he's an innovator. And he understood where things were going. He understood that, vinyl was going away, CDs were going away. This is all going to be about downloads. And so marrying those relationships, going to Apple, it was really incredible when you see how he thought. I have a client who taught me the concept of dreaming backwards, right?
Explain what that is.
Yeah, so you start with where you want to end. So you start, you've heard the saying, start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you dream backwards, you literally say, okay, I want my podcast to be top 10 podcasts, okay, that's where you start. And then you create the steps that got you there.
Okay. So
you dream backwards. And if you do it, it looks a little like a helix, how things can kind of intertwine, and but you have to stay in a certain lane, because if you look at a helix, it's the shape of it will always kind of twist and turn, but it doesn't go too far off of what that helix is. So everything you do is a stepping stone that gets you to the top, right?
Yeah.
But if you start with the concept of dreaming backwards, it is okay. Let's say I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. Okay, lofty. Then I will have already written Tom's book, okay? And I will have already put it on the New York Times bestseller. But what did I do to get it there? And you just back into it.
So it ties into like visualization.
No, because you really actually, you have to know it. I mean, you have to know what your goal is, right? You have to know what is that ultimate goal. And then you really have to map it out, physically write it down. What are the steps I took to get there? Because I think people so often in business, especially, operate without a plan.
Well, not only in business, in weight loss, in going to the gym. I mean, we've all done it. We want to get healthy. We want to get fit. We go to the gym, but we didn't do any research on what exercises to do or what to eat. So oftentimes I used to go to the gym and kind of look around going, I had all these things in mind prior to coming here, but I didn't really have a plan of what to do when I got here. And then you leave and, and you feel bad about it. But that's, you do that in business. You do that with your family. You do that in everything.
A plan is key. And even if you don't stick with the plan, even if you recalibrate, think of it as your GPS, right? When your GPS says, the traffic, on your route is going to be very heavy. Would you like me to reroute? Yeah. So reroute. It's like looking at it like a personal GPS.
I read this book a long time ago, and tell me if it rings a bell. I can't for the life of me remember what the name of it is, but it was all about you have to row. In order to row a boat straight, you can't ever row a boat straight because the wind and the current takes you. So you have to go zigzag oftentimes to go against the current with current, but you're still getting to where you're going to go. But that's an analogy of life.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by the helix, right? It's not a straight shot to get to where you want to go. You're going to have to zig left and zag right, and sometimes you might even come back down and around and go up, and because sometimes things don't work.
Yeah.
But that isn't going to stop you. If you're really committed, it shouldn't stop you from getting to where you want to go.
Well, the commit is not quitting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people give up. A lot of people throw their hands up in there and go, it's too hard. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I've got other things I need to do. So then they're not really committed. I'm
convinced that what separates successful people and not successful people is just not quitting. I'm convinced of that. And if you look at the Indian rain dance, why does that work? Well, they don't stop dancing until it rains. And that could be days, it could be weeks, but if you don't stop, I think it's mathematically impossible for it not to happen.
Right. And that's a lot of the theory behind The Secret, manifestation. So that's really, committing to what you want, thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. When you're thinking about something nonstop, guess what? You're moving toward it.
Or more importantly, you're moving away from the things that aren't taking you to that.
Right. So it could be exactly right. It could be one or the other. So if you were thinking, I want to have a successful career, I want a red BMW, or I need to get out of this relationship, whatever it is, at some point you are taking those steps to do it. I'm not a big secret follower, but that's the whole notion behind, it's perseverance.
Well, those are all good things. All right. You went to college.
I did.
What did you major in?
Political science.
Interesting.
Yes, I had I was on my way to law school.
So you gave up on your rock star dreams.
Yes.
Political science. How did you get into television?
So after I graduated and I went to Paris for 2 weeks and ended up staying a year. And I'm still friends, to this day, I'm still best friends with my girlfriend, Lisa Shields, who was living in Paris, and I called her and I said, hey, do you mind if I come out and stay for, a couple weeks? And I literally stayed for a year. With her? Yeah, in this teeny tiny little apartment in Paris. And I was supposed to start law school, and I knew it was not what I wanted to do. So I actually missed, showing up to school. And when I got home, my family was like, well, you're going to need to figure something out if you're not going to go to law school. And in those days, you became one of two things. A stockbroker or a headhunter, because those were great careers that you could make good money. And
in Detroit.
This was in Detroit. Okay. I went back to Detroit, and I couldn't pass my Series 7. I tried being a stockbroker, and I couldn't pass my Series 7. I just didn't have the head for numbers. I still don't have the head for numbers, but I'm really good with words. So I started, I went to work for a recruiting and search firm that specialized in executive level retail placements. And within the first 6 months of being there, I was outperforming everybody in that office. And I became one of the top performers in the country for this organization. And at that point, my splits were, they were what they were. I think, we got 30% of the salary of the person we placed, and I was getting like 30% of that. And I thought, well, why am I giving up all of that money? I should just go start my own firm. So I did. And
How old were you?
Oh gosh, 26.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 26. But I had really good clients. My clients were like TJ Maxx and Fashion Bug. Like these were big national chains. They weren't high end, but they were big national chains. So I was busy.
So was that your first why not moment?
I would say I've had a lot of why not moments, and I really, really, and thank you for bringing that up, because that really is when I tell you I'm impassioned by insult, right? I'm really motivated by it, and so when somebody tells me no, I'm like, oh, great, because success is the best revenge, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not a revenge seeker. I just move through the world, do what I'm going to do, but tell me no, and that all that does is light the fire. And no is just, and this is true for everything, no is a starting off point to yes, period. At some point, in some way, if you really want what you're going after, you'll get a yes if you don't accept the no. Okay,
Indian dance.
Right, Indian dance, exactly. So I started this recruiting and search firm. Also, my area of specialty was executive level retail. And what I noticed was my team, and I had hired a team of people. We had like a bullpen area, and I had noticed that my team was spending an enormous amount of time interviewing skills with these executives. Most of the people we were placing hadn't interviewed for a job in a really long time because they'd been bumped up the ladder. So they just got promoted. So they didn't have to interview for that. They just were like, okay, you're going to be a district manager. Now you're going to be a regional manager. Now you're going to be executive vice president, whatever. But they'd never had to interview, so taking them out of that organization and putting them someplace else, they had to interview.
Okay.
So my team was spending 30 to 45 minutes per candidate reviewing interviewing skills. And I'm a dial for dollars kind of gal. I'm all about the commerce. And so I thought, well, we'll just put it all on, this is going back a few years, but I said, let's just put it all on video. And we'll send the clients the video, and they'll watch the video, and then you'll review what they saw, and you can take
like
10
videotaped.
Yeah, listen,
interviews.
Yes, I did a full-on review. It was called Successful Interviewing, and it was a full-on review of the interviewing process. And then we also had like interview exchanges, the things to do, the things not to do, what to wear. It was just this review, like how to get ready for your interview. So that it just made sense to me. And as the universe delivers, I was working out in the gym that I belonged to in Southfield, Michigan. And I was on the Stairmaster, and I was next to a guy who was just making small talk. And he said, what have you been up to? I told him I just did this video on how to interview for a job. He said, oh, I work in college promotions for Ford. And I don't know if you remember, like back in the day, like they, the car companies, the credit card companies, when you graduated, they would inundate you with offers and giveaways and all sorts of things. So that was his job. He was the guy from Ford. And he said, I'd love to see a copy of your videotape. And I said, sure. I didn't think anything of it. So I sent him a copy of the video, which, by the way, we shot on beta.
Oh, boy.
Okay. It's me on camera. And it's we're going back a few years. So like 10 days later, I get a phone call from him, and he said, yeah, we'd like to send you a purchase order for 50,000 copies of this tape. And I was floored. Like I was stunned. And I said, do you think I could have a couple of days and get back to you? And I think he was stunned with that answer. Yeah. And so I did. I took their purchase order, and I shopped it because I was in Detroit. So I took it to GM and I took it to Chrysler. And I said, you've got a very short window of time to make me a better offer. And Chrysler ended up offering 75,000 copies of the video. And they tagged a little message from Lee Iacocca on at the front. We at Chrysler care about you, and congratulations on graduating. And we know you need two things when you graduate, a job and a car, and we want to help you get both. And that was it. That's what put me into production. And my next production after that.
See, that's brilliant, because you were just starting out,
Mm-hmm.
basically,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't take that first carrot. You went looking you used that as leverage to get the bigger carrot.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. And sometimes you'll get the bigger carrot and sometimes you won't. Nobody will be upset if you come back to them and say, great, I'll take your deal. They'll be upset when you come back to them and say, I'm not taking your deal. And, but in that instance, I knew if it was good for Ford, I assumed, and didn't know for sure, but I made the giant leap that Chrysler and General Motors must have college promotion divisions too.
Were you at all reluctant to do that? Did you have any reservations or fear
So
to take that chance of not having? I mean, he granted you a couple days, but he didn't have to.
No, he didn't have to, and there's always risk. But I've taught my daughter that fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. There's a lot of acronyms, but the one that we live by is false evidence appearing real. Most of the time, what we fear is in our head. It's not reality. So most of the time, we've created little monsters that they're the monsters that lived under our bed when we were kids, because we created them. And when mom and dad came in the room and they looked under the bed and they're like, and opened the closet door, they're like, see, no monsters. So you have to not let the monster live in your head. And so
trust your gut.
You do have to trust your gut, because if you can tune into that, I think your gut will always guide you. But I think the notion of not allowing self-doubt, that seed of I can't, doesn't live within me, because I come from a world of I can. We tell ourselves stories. The mind can't differentiate between a real and imagined thought. Mm-hmm. So if you tell yourself, I can't do this, what do you think you believe? But if you say, I'm doing this, and you go out and you do it, no harm, no foul. I think it's really about confidence. I think there is risk taking. There's calculated risk taking.
Where'd you get that confidence from? Was it your dad, seeing him run a business and going out there and being that example?
I'd like to tell you yes, but no. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was a great entrepreneur, and he was a very savvy businessman, and he was not afraid. Look, in business, the willingness to walk away is where you have your leverage. Mm-hmm. And actors in Hollywood will tell you that is part of negotiating, right? But it can't be false. It has to be real. You have to have a willingness to say, okay, look, my time is worth something. Your time is worth something. You want me to do this job, but you want me to do it for this. Mm-hmm. Well, if it doesn't work, then find somebody who will fill that time at the price that you. I can only write a certain number of books at once. So if you've got one of those slots, then that time is yours. And if I'm let's say I do a book for you for $10, and I do a book for somebody else for $8, and I'm doing another book for somebody for $1, it's still the same amount of time. So I may as well do 4 books for $10. And by the way, those are not my prices. But
But I was just going to sign you to a contract.
Yeah, but you follow what I'm saying. So what price peace? What to bring peace into your own world? What are you willing to give up, and what are you willing to go for? And I really think it's to have peace in your life. Every year, my daughter says to me, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I have one answer: peace. I have everything else. Mm-hmm. I have my health. I have my family. I have a great, thank God I have a good career.
Well, see, those first 2 things are most important, because I think about this all the time, having a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, even in your career, I mean, you have to pay for things. But if you don't have health, none of that matters.
That is for sure. Amen, brother. Matter. Yeah, you got that. And, we went through a year between 2015 and 2016 where it was a real struggle in my family. And you get those reminders. And now, we're getting to an age where we're watching friends of ours not make it. And, and that's hard, because it does bring to the forefront our limited time. You know, and I say this all the time, time is the only commodity we can't control. You can try, but you cannot control it. And
you're never going to win that battle.
No, you will not. And so I have learned to really embrace, that's why I talk about living in the moment, but I've really learned to embrace the time that you have. Put the phone down, put the devices down, engage. We have unplugged Sundays in my house. Nobody's allowed to use their devices.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I might adopt that.
Yeah, and you know what? It forces you to connect. You think you're connecting when you send a text that says "thinking of you," and then a cute little emoji with a kiss and a heart. That's not connecting. That's easy, but it's not connecting. And if anything, despite the way that it appears, it actually could be creating more distance because we need human contact. Somebody asked me the other day where I think all of this technology is going with the younger generation, with the millennials, and I said these are the kids that are going to actually be okay with having, you know, AI love affairs. They won't care.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they won't care. It's because, you know what, listen, we already had a movie about it, right? And the movie did well. So what does that tell you? People aren't freaked out by it. And
robots and self-driving cars and
but no interaction, no human contact. And, you know, we already have an underground world where people can, you know, take on a new identity and play games with people from all over the world. They don't have to be who they are. And it's make-believe. It's fantasy. You know, call me crazy, but, like, I don't know what makes somebody want to escape their life that much, but that's what they enjoy. Yeah. But I really think that contact thing is super important. So that's why, you know, we do the Unplugged Sundays. And I will tell you, there's great value in that. Especially you travel. I travel. You know, I'm a single mom, so I'm mom, dad, I'm everything. I do it all. And my daughter needs that connection time. And tucking her in at night on the days that I'm home is not enough. And it's not fair to them.
Well, how did you move from these videos to the workout videos?
Great question. So after I did the video for Ford or Chrysler, I went to Hollywood, baby. I was like, this is way more fun to do this. I mean, I loved getting people jobs, but I really enjoyed the creative process. And so while I was still working as a headhunter, I started a production company. And because, you know, I'm an underachiever. And
there's a common thread here where you create your own destiny. You create your own opportunities. You're not waiting around for someone to create them for you.
Well, if we wait, the best example of that I can give you is I have an agent, okay? And my agent rarely brings me work. And I think you'll find that that's true for a lot of people that you would talk to. It doesn't mean I don't love my agent. I adore my agent. But he rarely brings me work. Now, one would think that they're motivated by money.
Yeah.
It's hard. Nobody wants to do anything hard. So if I waited around for somebody else to do it for me, I couldn't pay my bills. And really, so it's out of, you know, it's necessity. And who's going to sell you better than you, Tom? Who's going to sell you better than you? You know, my agent will be on the phone. He's selling me and 3 other writers. You know, and who do you want to work with?
So why do you have an agent?
So, well, you know, good question. Good question.
He's probably listening to this right now going, don't.
Well,
get off the subject.
He's 44 years, you know, in the business, and I think that he's, you know, his happy days are coming, and you know, and the world's changed, and publishing has changed. It's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. But my point is, if I waited around for somebody else to do it for me, then I'm putting my destiny in somebody else's hands. And as it is, you know, we only have so much control over our destiny anyway, right? So we have personal choices that we can make, but at least that's what I believe. And so yes, so that is a common theme and a common thread, and that is what I did. And I ended up putting Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, Joe it was Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, and I think Sugar Ray Leonard was the fifth. And we did a documentary called Champions Forever. And I was the first and only person to put them all in the room at the same time and interview them. And that became iconic. And there's a poster that we had a photographer and a poster that became, you couldn't walk into a boxing gym without seeing that poster somewhere. And HBO, whenever a fight would go short, they would air Champions Forever. And then I just started doing other things in and around sports. And one thing led to another, and that's how I got into doing celebrity exercise videos.
And who were some of these exercise videos with?
Oh, I worked with Richard Simmons, who I love. I did a lot of work with Reebok. I worked with Linda Gray. I worked with Marla Maples. And I worked with Joan Lunden. And Joan Lunden was my transition into writing books, because I did Joan's exercise video, Good Morning, or I'm sorry, not Good Morning America. That was her show. I had nothing to do with that.
Around the same time, though.
She was absolutely the host of Good Morning. Yeah, she was the host of Good Morning America. But the video was called Workout America. And Joan had, she was 40 years old. She was single. She had 3 young kids at home. She had lost a bunch of weight. She had just gone through a high-profile divorce. And after we did the exercise video, when she and I met, it was like, I'd met my long-lost sister. It was like, it was like we'd known each other forever. And so we were out to dinner one night, and I said, you're only telling a small piece of the story in the exercise video. I mean, you look great, but I don't think that you are reaching your full potential of your audience. And she agreed. And we decided that we should write a book together. And the book was a combination of her personal journey of losing her weight and kind of rediscovering herself at age 40, being like going back out into the dating world and being a single mom and all of that, and a cookbook. And when we took the concept to her agent, who was at William Morris at the time, Jim Griffin, he thought it was the worst idea he ever heard. I'm like, he belly laughed when we presented it to him. And we were shocked. I mean, it was Joan Lunden. She was the host of Good Morning America. She was on 5 days a week, 20 million viewers. And I thought, well, like, what is he not seeing that we're seeing? And he said, well, Joan doesn't cook. I'm like, well, okay. But America sees Joan in the kitchen 5 days a week with Wolfgang Puck and Julia Child and all these other great chefs. So who cares? Like, who cares if Joan cooks? I mean,
She eats.
Yeah, she eats, but she certainly is also, she comes into your home every day. And where are you generally when you're watching her? You're having your morning coffee, you're eating your breakfast. So, the notion of Joan cooking or not cooking was irrelevant.
Well, you're skipping one thing, though. You pitched a book. You were going to be the writer of the book, right?
She asked me to be the writer.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you weren't a writer per se, because you were a TV producer.
Right.
But you found yourself, if I'm not mistaken, punching up scripts for writers that you would hire for the TV shows?
Right. That's exactly right. And I was frustrated because I would get these scripts back, and I was spending a lot of money on these scripts. And I would get these scripts back, and they were dreck for the most part. I don't want to, upset anybody who I've worked with over the years, but they needed some work. And again, going back to why, really why let somebody else do what I could do. And so I realized I had a bit of a knack for it, but I had never written a book. And when I suggested to Joan to write a book, I didn't say, hey, I want to write the book. She said, let's do it, and I want you to work on it with me. And in fact, interestingly, I was actually fired from that first book. Oh my God. And the reason I was fired from that first book, I ended up writing it and everything was fine, was because in her overzealousness, which Joan is always enthusiastic and always very proud to show people what she's doing along the way, she had sent a research binder into our publisher, and the publisher thought that was our book. And the publisher's like was looking at it going, there's no writing here. And
was it just data?
It was data. It was handwritten notes. It was, and so Joan, just in her excitement, was like, I want you to see what we're working on. And the agent got a call from the publisher and said, let that writer go. And we were like, what? And Joan came to my defense, and she said, no, that's not, that isn't why we sent you that. And she came to my defense, and they allowed me to stay on the project. And, that's true friendship, but that's also true collaboration. Mm-hmm. And so, and ultimately, by the way, when her agent thought it was such a horrible idea, I went out and sold the book. I went out to publishers and said, hey, I've got a cookbook with Joan Lunden. I was a producer, so I knew how to go out and raise money. So why in the world?
You paved your own way.
Yeah.
Again.
So why in the world wouldn't I have been able to go sit in front of various publishing houses? I had the #1 morning show host in America on the cover of my book, and so why wouldn't I? Let's see who's right. Let's see who's right. You, Mr. Television Agent, or us, who actually is the audience for this. And so it turned out I was right. And when we went back to the agent and said, look, I have a mid-6-figure offer for this book, that got his attention, of course, because now if he got involved, he could commission. And so he set us up with another agent who was one of the greats in the business, Al Lohman. And Al doubled the money that I got. So this was close to a 7-figure deal. And but by the time everybody took their cut and their share, I'm not sure that Joan and I wouldn't have done better without all of them. But we did end up putting that book on the New York Times bestseller list, and it really immediately got us a second book deal together. So again, if we had listened to her agent, the addiction to the opinion of others, right? If we didn't believe in our own project, if we didn't believe in what we were going out and selling, that would have died right there and then. That would never have happened. I would never have gotten into writing books.
It's funny how that all works out.
Yeah. So that's
a no turns into a yes.
Always.
So that started, let me read some of these.
Sure.
You've worked with Jennifer Hudson.
I have.
Justin Bieber.
Yes, I have.
Al Roker.
Mm-hmm.
Criss Angel. Mm-hmm. Danica Patrick. Dog the Bounty Hunter.
I love
which
Dog.
might be my favorite.
Mm-hmm. I just went to go see Hello, Dolly with the dog.
Oh my gosh.
That was awesome.
Here?
Yes.
What is it like walking into a Broadway theater with, is he wearing his hair?
Yeah, when we're done, I'll show you a picture. It's a great picture because his wife was with us, but she and her friend were sitting 2 rows in front of us. They were in the front row, we were in the 3rd row. And she's like, you have to sit with, she calls him Big Daddy. She goes, you have to sit with Big Daddy. I'm like, okay, that's fine, And so Dwayne and I were sitting, in our seats, and this very sort of, proper Upper East Side woman looks at him and she goes, you look familiar, And he goes, oh yeah, hey, my name's Dog. I still don't think she knew who he was. So Beth got up to take a picture of the two of us, and everybody in our section leaned into the picture like they were in it. And it is one of those classic pictures.
It's like that Oscar picture a couple of years ago.
It is. And everybody just thought that they were going to be in our picture. And it was, it's really hysterical. But he's very popular. When
I love that show.
Well, and not only that, his book was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, right out of the gate. And our publisher they couldn't grasp the fan reaction. They could not imagine. So on a good day, a well-known celebrity author might sell 100, maybe 150 books at a book signing. Dog was getting 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people showing up to his book signings. People were planning their summer vacations around coming to see the dog. And they would camp out in Walmart parking lots. And it was nuts. It's like, it is crazy to see how people respond to him, and truly they love him.
Yeah.
And I totally understand why. He's an interesting guy for many reasons. And he and Beth are doing some really important work right now, I think, in bail reform, and it's important that they maintain their stance on where they're at, because I think they really feel like some of the changes happening are not going to be in anybody's best interest. But he is, he's very clever. He worked with Tony Robbins for years and years and years. He's in Awaken the Giant. So if you read, he is. There's a whole story about his name is Dwayne Chapman.
Yeah.
And there's a whole, but Dog the Bounty Hunter he's in Awaken the Giant, and because he worked with Tony for years. And so he,
like personal growth stuff.
Personal growth. He was doing security. He was doing personal growth.
I
he was,
see.
but he was on stage speaking because he's got this amazing story, and it's what he's grown into, And I love, if you've ever watched the show. By the way, I went on a bounty hunt with him.
Oh. Did you have like vests?
See, this is what's so funny about that bounty hunt. No, I was wearing a white Gap T-shirt and flip-flops. Meanwhile, Beth and Dog and brother Tim and everybody else who was on.
Might as well have been wearing like deer hunting uniform.
Oh yeah, and there's but I went on his first bounty hunt after he had captured Andrew Luster, and who was the heir to the Max Factor fortune, who had fled to Mexico on.
That was like huge news.
It was huge news. He was found guilty in absentia of 86 counts of rape. And he fled to Mexico, and Dwayne went down and got him. He went down and got him. Our government couldn't find him.
There was something attached to that too, though, right?
A lot attached to it.
Wasn't he put in jail too?
He was put in jail because when he captured Andrew Luster said, "I'm not Andrew Luster."
Right.
And so Dwayne got arrested for kidnapping. Oh my God. But it turned out it was Andrew Luster, and also the definition of kidnapping is very specific. And Dwayne did none of the things that would have fit the definition of kidnapping. So what they got him on, so they put him in jail for 10 days.
We have a rough skeleton of laws down there in Mexico.
Well, it's sort of, and they put him in jail for 10 days, and they ultimately could only, which in kidnapping, of course, is a felony, but they got him for deprivation of liberty, which is a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
And that's basically you and me standing at a bar. I won't get out of your way. Okay? I won't let you move. I've got you cornered. Okay? That's deprivation of liberty. So his Mexican attorneys said to him, go home, leave Mexico, never come back. This is going away. We'll take care of it. Well, it didn't go away. And, several months later, he woke up at 4 a.m. with federal marshals busting through his front door with machine guns and a warrant for his arrest, and to send him back.
It's like the roles are reversed.
Yeah, and to send him back to Mexico. So he and he had to fight that for 4 years, and because it was a bad warrant, it was a bad arrest. It goes on and on. If you want to know more, you should read the book.
Yeah,
the book You Can Run But You Can't Hide. Yeah, it's a great story.
So in all these books, you were co-writing the books.
Yes.
So I want to get into that a little bit. Difference between co-writing, ghostwriting. Co-writing, you're on the book. It's known that, is that process where you just spend a lot of time with the subject, interview them per se, and then write their story and their voice, their perspective?
Yes. The process would be the same as ghostwriter too, but the difference is that you're not recognized as the co-author, and also some ghostwriters might have a piece of the back end, but most are not. Most of them work for hire. You get paid this fee and you go away. There's no continuation in terms of an interest in the project. I have an interest in all the books that I write. So it's not a partnership, but it's like having a piece of the
you have
box
stock
office.
in the book. So I was going to ask you about that. I had a question written down that I thought I needed to ask you about the business side of it. But in this conversation, I know the answer already. And my question was, when that first time you asked for a piece of the pie, was that a tough ask for you? But I'm kind of guessing from our conversation that wasn't. You again created that. This is what my time's worth. This is what this is worth, and I deserve this kind of thing. Well,
I was coming into writing, having never written a book before, but I wasn't coming into the business, as they say, as a rookie. So I understood the value of back-end participation because of my production background. So it really wasn't a tough ask because I had ownership in everything that I've done.
People are afraid to ask for money, especially money.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid
that's
of that
fear,
ask.
right?
Yeah.
That's fear. And, and young girls especially, who have been taught, even women, my age and my generation, we were taught not to speak up. That's the whole notion behind Cheryl's book, of Lean In. And yet, I actually think you can gently relax into. I don't think you have to lean in. I actually prefer gently relax into. But from that point of view, I think what's so important is that the younger generation understand they do have a voice. They do have opinions. They have ideas and concepts to share. And if we haven't taught them to use their voice, then they won't speak up at the conference room table. They won't ask for a raise. They will be okay getting 75 cents on the dollar that their male coworker is getting. And they will live in that world of inequality, right? And, so I teach my daughter to use her voice. And listen, parenting, that's not easy. But I'd rather parent her to use her voice so she knows how to do that in the world than stymie it.
Do you find that there's a gray area with that, where when to use your voice? Meaning, so I'll give you a great example. I have a 8-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. They've been in my business and come to the office and come to the studio, and they've come to shoots. I wanted them to see what Daddy does. Mm-hmm. I wanted them to get that experience and have that world and life experience. Sometimes I'm learning that there's that gray area where, my daughter was upset she wasn't coming to New York today. And she started writing on my notes. And I'm like, this is my job, But there's that gray area of empowering them, but knowing when to use that assertion.
Look, it's funny that you're saying this, because I think there is a little age appropriateness there going on. But yes, I do think that I can't speak for your kids, but I can make the leap. Your kids have lived in a pretty adult world, mm-hmm. and my daughter certainly has. We've exposed them to things that a lot of kids don't get to see, right? How we've looked behind the curtain. Most kids don't understand the inner workings of how television is made, or get to meet the people that they get to meet. My daughter, she's pretty unfazed by all of it, and therefore believes that she's every bit a part of it.
Right. We're in the same boat.
Right. So, there's a good, there's
especially when you have a daughter that's been in TV commercials and she sees you as a peer in her head.
Right. Right. So, it is a fine line that we walk as parents to keep them as children. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons I left New York City. I just felt like keeping her in a smaller community that was a little slower in terms of lifestyle would balance out all of the other stuff.
So she goes to school?
She goes to school in upstate New York.
Okay, upstate.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a gift. Yeah. It's a gift for her to have that. My daughter is a very big, and I think a lot of parents deal with this, because I think that we're living in a world where kids, are exposed to so much in terms of media and what they see on the internet. And even if we limit where they can go on the internet, they're still getting a lot of messaging. And so I think a lot of parents deal with this, and particularly I think with young girls over young boys. My daughter wants to grow up faster than she wants to stay a kid.
Constant slowing down.
Yeah. So that's part of, it goes back to that disconnect. I gave my daughter an iPhone so that she could stay in touch with me while I was on the road. And I wanted her not to have to go through somebody else to get to me. And it's backfired a little in terms of...
At what age did you do that?
This past year. So, at 9. But it's backfired a little bit. One, she forgets to take it with her all the time. But when she does have it, she's not very responsive. And so, and I don't want our communication to be through the iPhone. But it's a tough tightrope that we walk. Yeah. And especially now, as a single mom, it's hard because I really have to balance my time And that's all she really wants.
Yeah.
That's all she really wants is that time and attention. You know, even Oprah said when she left her show, she said that all of her guests, it didn't matter what walk of life they came from, they all had one thing in common. They just wanted to be acknowledged. And I keep that in the back of my mind because I remember that my daughter, my friends, my family, they just want to be acknowledged. They just want to know that you hear them.
It's a good life lesson right there, you know? All right, let me go back 1 second. So when you're the co-writer, you're writing in someone else's voice. Mm-hmm. So I look at this coming from my world in TV, it's very much like an actor in that an actor studies the subject, learns the nuances of that person, and learns their voice, and then delivers lines as that person. Well, you're doing the same thing, I think, but you're writing in their voice, and you're learning their mannerisms and their nuances. And then so the end goal is people think that they wrote the book, right? Is that correct?
Well, look, some of my clients are truly collaborative. Okay. Right? So, you know, the term collaborator and co-author could be interchangeable, right? And some of them are not. Some of them, I mean, they're collaborative in the sense that they've given me the material to work with and don't want to see anything until we have a book written. And some of them want to be involved in the process of the process. What I do, look, I'm a pretty ordinary person who works with extraordinary people. Mm-hmm. You know, my gift is being able to put myself in other people's shoes. Okay. And I believe wholeheartedly if I feel something, other people will feel something too. So my job is to find those narratives that will allow people to emotionally connect. And if I can find those narratives, because they have to go deeper and beyond that, what I refer to as the New York Times, you know, soundbite, right? We've already heard this before. I want to know why you feel this way, not that you just feel this way. What happened in your life that brought you to this point? And people tell me things that they didn't anticipate. I build a level of trust with the people that I work with that is not unlike seeing a therapist. But they then allow me the creative freedom to take those feelings, those emotions, those words, and those nuances and compile it in the form of a manuscript. And they allow me to do what I do. So, but I do get to know them. I understand their cadence, their rhythm, the words they use, the words they wouldn't use.
Is that like a switch you turn on and off? Like, have you ever had to do, or were you ever writing two books at the same time? Mm-hmm. Is that just is that a flip of a switch?
I write two books at the same time all the time. I'm constantly writing, multiple books at the same time. It is, because if, let's say one day I don't want to write Dog the Bounty Hunter, I can write Susan Lucci. I'm never confusing those two voices. Okay. Ever. So it's, someday I might want to write about chasing the bad guy, and then, Tuesday I want to write about, working on all my children.
When you wrote Justin Bieber's book,
mm-hmm.
I'm assuming he was like 23?
No, he was young. He was he was just graduating high school. He was 18 or 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you, in your brain, mm-hmm. write, because in that book...
I think he's 23 now. I don't think yeah.
Your name's not on that book, so mm-hmm. you're a ghostwriter in that sense, right?
Yeah. So my name's not on the cover. My name is in the acknowledgments.
Right.
And with someone like Justin, there is a branding for his fan base. Now look at who his fan base is. They don't want to know somebody else wrote that book. They want to feel like Justin's talking just to them.
So that's my point.
Yeah.
You were Justin Bieber in that instance, right?
Oh yeah.
Is that odd to be a 18-year-old boy, think that way?
No, I mean, maybe it would be odd if I went out and I pretended to be Justin Bieber, but
But did you have to?
I spoke to him, and
you had to sell it like it was him writing the book.
For sure, and he signed off on it. I mean, he read it, and and let me say this about Justin. He was incredibly professional. He never missed an appointment. He was always prepared. He gave me what I needed. It's not my longest book. It's, there's a lot of pictures in the book, but I'm really proud of the work that we did together because we talked a lot about issues that I think spoke to the kids, particularly bullying and, some other crisis issues that I think young kids deal with. So Justin allowed me to take, his experiences, for example, with the paparazzi and turn that into a monologue on bullying, because for him first of all, it is a form. It is, But he didn't go to, Central High School with the rest of the kids who are reading this book. So his bullying comes from this place. Their bullying comes from going to school every day. And so what we wanted to do is find a message and a voice where Justin could, talk to those kids and help them understand. Look at the number of kids that commit suicide over bullying.
Sure.
And so if Justin, could use that platform and we could take that story and make it work and inspire that kid who's feeling like it's just them and they realize Justin's going through it too, then that is a job well done.
Do you go into writing a book with those kind of strategies where we want to accomplish this in the book? Or this
it goes back to my dreaming backwards concept.
Yeah.
I always want to know, what is it that you want to get out of this book? But I very rarely Google the people that I'm going to work with because, I don't. I mean, maybe if I've never heard of them and I want, specifically like a lot of the CEOs and business people that have contacted me over the years. But I don't want to read somebody else's version of them. I mean, I have the privilege of having access.
Well, it's also the same reason in preparing for this, I didn't listen to any other podcasts or interviews that you were on because I didn't want it to taint what we were going to do.
Right. So if you come in as a clean slate, then especially if you're working and writing as that person, then you really need to get to know them. And what I've found is that you will ask the right questions as opposed to zeroing in on what somebody else has already covered.
Yeah.
And I think one of my great skill sets is listening. I don't know that I've done enough of that today, but
this is not your day to listen.
But it really is my skill set, and people feel comfortable to let it go.
Well, the dichotomy between I call them subjects of the people that you've written with is astonishing to me. So if I were to ask you, I'm not going to ask you now, but in theory, if I were to ask you, I want you to write 2 paragraphs, one with Justin's voice and one with Jennifer Hudson's voice. Could you easily just flip that switch and write something in there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I vividly remember Jennifer's voice. I'd really have to go back and look at Justin and how, but I remember, look, I've spoken to Justin, so, but yeah, I could. But I don't think there's as big of a dichotomy between those two as, say, Justin and Elizabeth Smart.
Okay.
Right? But now you're talking famous, not famous, horrific story of survival versus fame and, and what he faces. So I think I can flip the switch. I actually had a client who told me that I started taking on not only just physical, but my whole demeanor would change when I was working with someone. So I would take on a lot of their traits.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So when I was working with Dog, I was a badass.
It's very much like an actor, when like Daniel Day-Lewis, he stays in character.
Yeah,
and then he becomes that character.
Yeah,
I'm
a character. Yeah, very much so. I absolutely feel like I take on some of their traits. When I was working with Susan Lucci, for example, she is one of the nicest people on the planet. And I think we use the word wonderful 232 times in the book because that's her word. Yeah. That's how she sees things. The world is wonderful. And so I started using the word wonderful. So it's, it is like acting. I do, I believe Macy's has hours too, so I do at some point shut that off. When I first started off in the business, I had a designated phone line just for my clients, so if that phone rang after a certain time, I knew either answer it and risk being engaged or don't answer it because the office is closed.
Yeah.
And so I remember Rosie O'Donnell calling I think it was Rosie O'Donnell had called looking for Joan Lunden at one point, and because Joan and I were working on the book, and so somehow she had my number, and she called looking for Joan Lunden, and it was like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I said, well, if you're looking for Joan Lunden, turn on Channel 7. Like, she's on the air right now, So
that's too funny.
Yeah.
So if you take on these personalities after you work with Dog, were you like jumping at the moment to do like, arresting people? And what do they call that? Citizen's arrest?
No, going on that bounty hunt where we found the guy, because I had a lot to do with it.
Oh, sure.
That was about as close as I needed to get to that. I assure you that bounty hunting doesn't...
Was this in Hawaii?
Yes, this was in Hawaii, and you can download my episode off of iTunes.
Oh, is it on there?
It is.
Are you on there?
It is.
Oh.
It's Rusty Cuffs.
I'm looking at that. I'm going to have to write that down. Rusty Cuffs?
Rusty Cuffs.
All right.
Because it was his first
hunt
after the whole debacle with Luster. He hadn't been out bounty hunting for a long time. So...
That is so interesting. Well, listen, we've talked a lot about some of the people. Tell me who Dave Stevenson is.
Dave Stevenson. He is such a great... He is what a salty, character should be on the page. Dave... So I wrote a book with Dave called You Bet Your Life. And the book is out now. And I live in Saratoga Springs, where it is the oldest thoroughbred track in the country, and it's also the oldest sporting venue in the country. And so I have a great passion for an appreciation for thoroughbred racing. I don't go to the track as often as I used to when I first moved up there, but I met Dave because he comes up for the races. And Dave he's a legend in horse racing. He's the winningest Canadian jockey in history. But Dave also went on to do many great things in the world of horse racing, which stems from after he got too big to be a jockey. He became a trainer, he became an owner, and then he went to work for the organizations that really run the racing. So he ran NYRA, which is the New York Racing Association, which is Belmont and the Saratoga, and it goes on and on. But what Dave did that really became interesting later in his career, and he's worked with all the greats. In fact, if you know the story about bringing Secretariat to Woodbine in Toronto for Secretariat's last race, that was Dave. And so he made arrangements to have Penny Tweedy bring Secretariat, and there was actually a kidnapping attempt on the horse, and it was a very big deal. So Dave has worked with, every great jockey, every great horse. He's ridden some of, if you read the book, and again, it's You Bet Your Life. If you love horse racing, or you love that era of horse racing, it is, first of all, it is such a great personal story, because he ran away from home when he was 12 years old. Wow. He put a shotgun to his father's head and said, "If you hit my mother again, I will kill you." And his father was abusive. He was, and Dave also was getting beaten all the time. So Dave ran away. Wow. And he went to Kentucky, and he lived in a turkey house, and he was a hot rider, meaning he would take these wild horses and break them, but he would also ride the hots, which are the guys that get on the horse, and now gals too, that get on the horses to ride them and exercise them, and then on the day of a race, he'll get the horses warmed up. And so he was a hot rider. But what they realized was he was actually really good. And he became this, crazy successful jockey. After he retired, he was working for NYRA, and he was trying to bring more business to New York. And so he came up with the concept of simulcasting a race from Belmont to a group of investors and in London. And they had horses racing at Belmont. So he came up with the idea to...
He invented that.
He did.
Wow.
He invented simulcast. So everything we know about simulcast in real time is because of Dave. And here's what happened. The investors were a group of Arab sheiks that were in London, and they happened to bet on the horse that day from London, at Ladbrokes. And, when Dave found out, and they weren't supposed to, because at the time there was it was not, you see, it's hard to even understand that didn't exist. But at the time, the ability to bet in real time on a race happening, between London and New York was impossible. Okay, but because he was simulcasting the race to them, they were able to place a bet at Ladbrokes because of the time change, because of many things. What he figured out was there was a business in offshore betting. So not only did he create simulcast, he created offshore betting.
That's wild.
Yeah, and his story of who he's dealt with in building that offshore world. I mean, the subterranean economy in and of itself could take an hour of our time to talk about. But he was dealing with every warlord in South America, and I mean, the stories are the original title of the book is Many Ways to Die, and the reason is that this guy should have died. If he should have died once, he should have died 12 times. And he's like Forrest Gump in that he would find himself in these situations. And you'd be like, how is this even possible? And yet when we vetted every single story, it was all real. He would fly his own plane down to pick up money from all of the betting, places that he had the simulcast boxes. And if they didn't pay, he shut them down.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's a fascinating guy. Really loved working with Dave. And Jerry McDonald was a very big part of that project. And sadly, he passed away before the book was published. But his wife, Marcia, has been able to enjoy the success of that book. And we really hope to have a movie made out of it. It
sounds like
it is truly a great, great story. Yeah.
Well, you've branched, continuing making your own path. You're doing speaking workshops?
I am.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So I'm doing more, now I'm doing, so much like we're talking today, and I started to say this to you before, like the thing that really gets, so do you know what ikigai is?
Yeah.
Okay, the Japanese word, what gets you up in the morning, what motivates you, what's your life purpose. My ikigai is, I really want to add value into the world. I really want to help people feel better. I think people don't feel good right now. I think they don't know why. I don't even think they can explain it. But I think I have the ability to make people feel better. I certainly have the ability to make them think. I have the ability to help them look inward. And so I've started doing various speaking engagements. And one of the other things that I've started doing that I'm really excited about are these storytelling workshops that I'm doing for different organizations. I've done it in the real estate world, corporations. I'm now doing it for nonprofits because I think the nonprofit world, which I actually love the concept of changing nonprofit to for purpose. So as a master, as a master storyteller, no one in the business has the credentials. No one doing storytelling workshops has the credentials that I have as a author, as a New York Times bestseller. I mean, I have 20 New York Times bestsellers. And so I come at it from a very different point of view. But I also, as now, we've spent this time together, I have a really great business mind. And so I'm able to help people pull out, their material. But the workshops are so important because organizations operate with their internal stories being in conflict with their external stories, and their messaging gets muddled, and what their people are talking about inside the company impacts everything. And that needs to be refined. And I think I don't think people really understand the art of good storytelling. They can tell good stories, but are they getting you the kind of response that, let me give you a great example. Do you know why Netflix launched Game of Cards? Game of Cards, right?
Game of Thrones.
Okay, no, not Game of Thrones, sorry. House of Cards.
Okay.
House of Cards. I've got my two favorite shows all mixed up. House of Cards, because they understood that networks did not get this. Networks release episodes one at a time. Netflix banked on people binge watching. They absolutely banked on it because they knew that people were hungry for good stories. And if you love a good story, you're going to spend 3 days.
It's like reading a book.
Well, it is, exactly. But you're going to spend 3 days binge watching whatever your favorite show is, Narcos, any of these shows, right? You'll give up going to the gym. You'll give up showering. You won't spend time with your family, right?
I've been there.
Everybody. But the reason why they did it is because they knew people were hungry for good stories. And so take that and then say, okay, why aren't people talking about you and your company and your organization and your purpose the way that they're talking about Game of Thrones or Billions or House of Cards? Because you're not telling them the right story. Because if you were telling them the right story, people would continuously repeat that story. We are hardwired to take in stories. We are not hardwired to take in facts and figures, period. That's how our brains work. So you will remember a story, and if the story moves you, if the story takes you someplace where you emotionally connect, all the better. And so that is what built Netflix. And that is what I teach in my storytelling workshops is if you can convey in 140 characters, now that's going to double, but still, if you can convey in 140 characters a message that's so strong that people talk about you the way they talk about Game of Thrones, winner, winner, chicken dinner, right? But you have to know what story to tell. And most people make the mistake of making themselves the hero. Their organization, themselves. And so right out of the gate, those stories aren't going to work.
I have a lot of questions about that, but I'm gonna save it so you can actually teach it to people in your workshops.
Thank you.
I don't want to ruin it for you.
Yeah.
All right, so
I'm excited about it. I really enjoyed it because after all these years of doing what I do, I think it's so great that I can take that knowledge and then spin it into something that actually helps people get to where they want to go.
Well, it's fascinating. I'm thinking about, how to do it for my clients and my company, and I'd never thought of it that way before.
Well, that's the whole goal is to help you see it, just change your perspective. And, in my speaking, I enjoy so much. I'm doing an event in Louisville on the 17th of October, and it's what I've learned from telling other people's stories. So it's 7 great lessons that I've taken away from just some of the clients that I've worked with. But it is really a popular speech because people love to hear the behind the scenes, kind of what we've been doing today. Yeah.
Well, I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
I'm going to let you get out of here. How have you used media, social media, to get your message out there, to promote, to engage?
I have not been great with my social media. I can tell you that when I do work my social media, people engage. So I build my audience. One of the things that I am very careful about with my social media is that when I do build my audience, it's a real audience. Right. So the people that are following me continue to follow me, and they, so I keep them engaged. For a very long time, I didn't even have a website. I would tell people would be like, well, what's your website? I'd be like, www.amazon.com, because they could look up my books. But now, I have a website, and I think social media is really important. But what I use social media for is it truly is to advance my intentionality in the areas that are important to me, as opposed to promoting my work and my product, because I find that people are more motivated from what your purpose is than your profit.
So, are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yeah, absolutely.
It ties into what he did with the wine videos that was it Wine Library?
Wine Library.
He purposefully did not overstock the wines that he featured in those videos because he didn't want it to come off self-serving. Like, I'm telling you about this so you buy it. He was just educating them and giving them value. And he only had the normal amount, a couple cases at the store. But he didn't want it to be about that. So it speaks to that same concept.
Yeah. I mean, I'll put up, hey, this book just came out, or hey, look at this article. But I'm really not hard selling. What I do want to hard sell is inspiration,
right,
motivation. I definitely know that when people see my posts, just based on the response that I get, it usually elicits some kind of dialogue, which is what I hope for, and primarily positive. Right now, more than ever, I think, putting positive messaging into the world is so needed, and for everybody. For everybody. And I know that it helps me feed and fuel my own positivity. But it's a very intentional decision.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. What's been your favorite failure that led you to a breakthrough?
This is a great question. I really, there were a couple of things that come to mind when you asked me that question. One, I turned Billy Blanks down to produce Tybo. Pick your head up off the table now, Tom.
Wow.
Yes, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
And I went with the hot girl who trained Michelle Pfeiffer for Catwoman. I just thought...
And we don't know who that is.
Well, I do know who it is, but
do,
you don't know,
yeah,
right?
I
Yeah, Stephanie Steele. And I wrote Billy a really nice letter. And Billy's son came to me years later, to do a project. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know that I can turn you down twice, but no. But I do keep that rejection letter in my desk drawer, along with the letter that I received from Judith Reagan, who I wrote Marilu Henner's Total Health Makeover for. And when I turned in that manuscript, it was 420 loose pages, and I was having a challenge with my pagination. And it was, it was a glitch in my Word program, and I was still working on floppy disk at the time. And everybody's gonna think I'm old.
Remember those?
Yeah, everybody's gonna think I'm so old, but I'm not. I'm very cool and hip.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, thank you. So, when I turned in the manuscript, she threw the 420 loose pages at me, like threw it at my head, and I was stunned. I was like, first of all, what human being does this? And secondly, I said to her, and she's notorious. If you don't know anything about Judith, she was notoriously one of the roughest.
It sounds appropriate.
Yeah. And I mean, she had a lot of turnover in her office, and that book was a year late when I came on, and I wrote it in 90 days. And a week later, I got a letter from her congratulating me on a job well done.
Nice.
Yeah. So I keep those two letters in my desk drawer as a reminder of mistakes that people make, and that you don't always have to win to be successful, and that sometimes we make choices that will change where we go.
Well, turning down Billy Banks. You might look at that and think about all the back end you could have had on those videos.
Oh, just about every day.
But you wouldn't have gotten anything else after that in terms of what you've done so far. You know what I mean? Because there's...
He did about $100 million. I'm pretty sure I'd be okay with,
I'm trying to
with my
spin
back
this
end.
on
I know.
You wouldn't be here talking to me, probably.
Yeah, well, I would. I'd still be here talking to you, because I'm still just me, ordinary gal.
Well, those parallel lives would have taken you somewhere else.
You never know. I mean, everything for a reason.
So it happens for a reason.
Everything for a reason.
Right.
And I'll tell you, Billy, I bumped into him more than once, and he has always been super great.
Yeah.
It didn't stop him. My rejection didn't stop him, and there's the bigger picture.
Neither of you have done bad.
Right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. This is your time to pass the baton. Who can you hand that mic over to that our listeners would love to hear their story?
That is, I first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I really loved chatting with you. This was an extraordinary conversation. I think that I would like to pass the baton to my friend Joe Kakady and his incredibly talented son, Kenny. And the reason why I'm going to make that suggestion to you is that Kenny is 14 years old, and he is a songwriter, and he has chosen to write songs about patriotism and the love that he has for his country. And he is a very dedicated young man, and I love the concept of watching this father and son go on this journey together, because they too are working very hard to put some positivity out into the world, but they're doing it through music. And the family has used music to raise a lot of money for philanthropy. They have 3 kids, and the kids have a band.
Oh my gosh.
And they raised, a lot of money for the Lymphoma Society. And what I really love is that you've got a support system in that family that is really unique. And but this young man is super talented, and I love where his heart is. I love where his heart is. And as parents, we hope that we give our kids the tools to do the right things and to make the right choices. Mm-hmm. And when you see your friends' kids doing that, it's a really, really great feeling. And, so I really think you'd enjoy interviewing them. I think there's a lot to run with there. So I'd love to pass the baton to Joe and Kenny.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Speaking of thanking, thank you for coming here. I know I took too much of your time today, but I appreciate you being here. And it was good to catch up. We're doing this backwards, the dream thing again, but we met, 9 years ago?
Well, Sevi is 9, so I would say probably 8 or 9 years ago.
So my
kids
daughter
were babies,
they were both kids.
Yeah, so probably 8 years ago, because Sevi your daughter was young, as 1 year younger than, right? Yeah, and we met in Orlando.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all these years later, you've been always super cool to me. And the one thing I will say, though, it always makes me paranoid when we do communicate, because you're a writer and have all these New York Times bestselling books, that you're judging my horrible messaging and emails.
Let go of the opinions of others.
I know. We're going full circle with this. Well, thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
I have so much more to talk to you about, so maybe down the road we'll do this again.
I would love it.
Awesome.
I would love it. What fun. This has just been great. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.